Nobody noticed the girl fall. Havenport Station was too loud, too crowded, and too busy making money to care about one small body hitting the floor. Thousands of aliens moved through the trading corridors every hour, pushing carts, shouting prices, and guarding their goods with weapons and sharp eyes. The air smelled like engine oil and sweat and something chemical that burned the back of the throat. Water had become gold here. 3 weeks ago, a supply chain collapse in the outer systems had turned the most basic resource in the galaxy into the most expensive one. Merchants who once sold water cheaply now locked it behind security gates and charged prices that could buy a small ship. Everyone was thirsty. Everyone was desperate. And the ones who controlled the water controlled everything. Lyra was 10 cycles old. She had pale blue skin, wide dark eyes, and hands that shook when she tried to lift them. Her species, the Sorelli, needed water more often than most beings in the galaxy. Their bodies processed it faster, used it to regulate temperature, heal wounds, and keep their organs functioning. Without regular hydration, a Sorelli could go from healthy to dying in less than 2 days. Lyra had not had a proper drink in almost 1 full day. She had walked through the market for hours, moving from stall to stall, asking anyone who would look at her for just a small cup. Just enough to stop the shaking. Just enough to keep her legs working so she could get back to her mother. A Grecian merchant with gray scales and 4 arms had laughed at her. A Minari trader had waved her away like she was a pest. A group of Hollian workers had stepped around her without even slowing down. One vendor had pointed at a price board. 200 credits for a quarter cup. Lyra had nothing. Not a single credit to her name. She had been a passenger on a refugee transport from the Sorelli colony world of Ren, which had lost its water supply 6 months ago. The transport had been raided by scavengers halfway through the journey. Her father had been taken. She and her mother Nessa had made it to Havenport with nothing but the clothes they wore. Now her mother was lying in the refugee hold below the station, too weak to move, and Lyra had come up to the market levels to find help. She found none. Her knees buckled near a ventilation grate on the lower edge of the market floor. She went down softly, like a cloth folding. Her cheek pressed against the cold metal grate, and she could feel warm air blowing up from the machinery below. Her vision blurred. The sounds of the market became distant and watery, like voices heard through a wall. She did not cry. She was too dry to cry. Daniil Sorokin was not having a good day either. He was a human cargo hauler, 34 years old, with rough hands and tired eyes, and a ship that needed repairs he could not afford. He had been moving crates of machine parts from Dock 7 to a warehouse on the mid-levels for the last 5 hours. His back hurt. His boots were worn thin. And the pay for this job was barely enough to cover fuel cost. He was dragging a heavy crate on a wheel platform when he saw her. A small blue figure on the ground near the grate. At first he thought it was a piece of dropped cargo. The station was messy and things fell off carts all the time. But then he saw the fingers. Small fingers curled slightly, not moving that he stopped. The crowd moved around him like water around a stone. Nobody else stopped. A Minari woman stepped over the girl without looking down. A pair of Grecian traders walked past arguing about prices. Daniil left his crate and walked over. He knelt down. The girl was breathing but barely. Her skin, which he guessed should have been a brighter blue, looked pale and almost gray. Her lips were cracked. When he gently touched her shoulder, her skin felt papery and hot that he knew what dehydration looked like. He had grown up on a dry colony world before moving to Earth for work. He had seen people go down like this before. He pulled his canteen from his belt. It was half full, clean water, filtered through his ship's system that morning. On Havenport right now, this half canteen was worth more than his daily wages. He did not think about that. He lifted the girl's head carefully and brought the canteen to her lips. A few drops first, then a slow, steady pour as she started to respond. Her eyes opened, dark, wide, confused. She flinched at first, not understanding who he was or why he was helping. "Slow," Daniil said quietly. "Small sips. You are okay." She drank. Not much, but enough. Her fingers stopped shaking after a minute. Color began to return to her skin, the gray fading back toward blue. Her cracked lips started to smooth as her body pulled the water in and used it to repair itself. Around them, other beings watched, some with curiosity, some with suspicion. A Hollian dockworker shook his head as if Daniil had just done something incredibly stupid. Water was money. Water was survival. And this human had just given his away to a stranger. Lyra looked up at him. Her voice came out rough and small. "Why?" she asked. Daniil capped his canteen and put it back on his belt. He looked at her for a moment, then shrugged. "Because you needed it," he said. He helped her sit up against the wall. The market noise continued around them. Nobody came to help. Nobody asked if the girl was all right. The galaxy kept moving, buying and selling, hoarding and profiting. But for one small moment, next to a ventilation grate on the lowest level of the market, someone had stopped. Lyra held the human sleeve like it was the only solid thing left in the universe. She did not know his name yet. She did not know why he had helped her when no one else would. But her fingers gripped the rough fabric of his jacket, and she did not let go as they walked through the lower corridors of Havenport Station. Daniil did not try to pull away. He matched her pace, which was slow and unsteady, and kept one hand near her shoulder in case she stumbled again. The corridors down here were dim and narrow. The lights flickered. The walls were stained with rust and coolant leaks. This was the part of the station that the merchants and diplomats never saw. "How far?" Daniil asked. "2 more levels down," Lyra said. Her voice was still weak, but clearer now. The water had helped. "The refugee hold is at the bottom." He nodded. He had heard about the refugee holds, but had never been down there. Cargo haulers worked the mid-levels and docking bays. The bottom of the station was where they put the people who had nowhere else to go. As they walked, Daniil noticed a Grecian male watching them from a side corridor. The alien was tall, with dark gray scales and narrow yellow eyes. He wore expensive clothes, not the kind you saw on the lower levels. He was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and he watched Daniil and Lyra pass with an expression that sat somewhere between interest and contempt. Daniil did not know it yet, but the Grecian's name was Torval. He ran the black market water trade on Havenport. Every drop of water that reached the refugees went through him first, and he added a price to it that stripped them of whatever small belongings they had left. A blanket for a cup, a piece of jewelry for a bottle. He had been making enormous profit from the drought, and he did not appreciate strangers handing out free water in his territory. Torval said nothing. He just watched, and then he turned and disappeared into the shadows. Daniil and Lyra reached the refugee hold 10 minutes later. The smell hit him first. It was the smell of too many bodies in too small a space with not enough ventilation. Warm, sour, thick. The hold was a massive cargo bay that had been converted into living quarters with thin dividers and stacked sleeping platforms. Hundreds of Sorelli filled the space. Families, elderly, children. Most of them sat or lay still, conserving energy. Their blue skin looked faded. Their eyes were dull. Nobody was panicking. They were past panic. This was the quiet stage of suffering where people stopped fighting and simply waited. Lyra pulled Daniil through the rows of platforms until they reached a corner near the back wall. A woman lay on a low platform, covered with a thin sheet. Her skin was almost white. The blue had drained out almost completely. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. "Mama," Lyra said softly, kneeling beside her. Nessa opened her eyes slowly. They were the same dark eyes as her daughter's, but clouded and unfocused. She tried to speak, but her lips barely moved. Daniil knelt down and looked at her. He had seen dehydration before, but this was severe. Without water soon, this woman would not survive the night. That he pulled out his canteen. There was not much left, maybe a quarter of what it held that morning. He had given most of it to Lyra in the market, but he unscrewed the cap and carefully helped Nessa drink. She took it in tiny amounts, her throat working hard to swallow. Lyra watched with her hands pressed together against her chest. When the canteen was empty, Daniil sat back and looked around the hold. He counted roughly 300 Sorelli in this section alone. There were probably more in other holds. All of them in the same condition. All of them slowly dying because the station had decided that water was a product to be sold, not a right to be given. Something turned inside him. Not anger exactly, but something harder and more certain that he pulled out his communication device and called his ship. Farah answered on the second tone. She was his co-pilot, a sharp woman from the northern districts of Earth who had been flying cargo routes with him for 3 years. Her voice was calm and steady as always. "What is it?" she said. "I need you and Reuben to meet me at the lower refugee hold. Level 9, Section 4. A pause. "That is not on our schedule." "I know." Another pause, longer this time. "Daniil, what did you do?" He looked at Lyra, who was gently stroking her mother's hand. He looked at the rows of silent, fading Sorelli around them. He thought about his cargo hold, where 12 sealed containers of water purification tablets sat waiting for delivery to a mining colony in the next system. Those tablets could turn recycled gray water into clean drinking water. Enough tablets to supply a small settlement for months, or enough to save every person in this hold. "I found something that matters more than our delivery schedule," he said. Farah was quiet for a long time. He could hear Reuben in the background asking what was going on. Reuben was their mechanic, a big, quiet man who complained about everything but never once refused to help when it counted. "We will lose our contract," Farah said finally. "I know. We could lose our trading license." "I know that too." He heard her exhale slowly through her nose. It was the sound she made when she knew he was right, but did not want to admit it yet. "We are on our way," she said. Daniil ended the call and looked down at Lyra. She was staring up at him with those wide, dark eyes. And for the first time since he had found her on the market floor, there was something in them that looked like hope that he did not make her any promises. He did not tell her everything would be fine. He just sat beside her and waited for his crew to arrive, while around them, 300 Sorelli held on to whatever thin thread of life they had left. Farah did not say a word when she walked into the refugee hold. She just stood at the entrance, looked across the rows of fading Sorelli, and pressed her jaw tight. Reuben came in behind her, ducking under the low door frame, and his face went through something Daniil had never seen on the big man before. It was not shock. It was recognition, like he had known places like this existed, but had hoped he would never have to stand in one. "How many?" Farah asked quietly. 300 in this section," Daniil said. "I do not know how many are in the other holds." Reuben crouched beside a Sorelli elder who was lying motionless on a platform. He checked the old man's pulse with 2 fingers and shook his head slowly. "Not dead, but close." "The purification tablets," Farah said, looking at Daniil. It was not a question. She already knew what he was thinking. She had known the moment he called. 12 containers, Daniil confirmed. Each one holds 500 tablets. One tablet can purify 10 liters of gray water into clean drinking water. "That is 60,000 liters, Reuben said from the floor. "More than enough," Daniil said. Farah crossed her arms. Her expression was hard, but not closed. She was calculating the way she always did before making a decision. Risks on one side, consequences on the other. "The tablets belong to the Venery Mining Collective," she said. "We signed a delivery contract. If we divert them, we breach the contract. The final loan could ground us for a year. And the station authority will not look the other way. Havenport runs on trade law." "I know all of that," Daniil said. "I'm not arguing against it," Farah said. "I am making sure you understand the cost." "I understand." She looked at Lyra, who was sitting beside her mother, watching the 3 humans with wide, uncertain eyes. Farah's expression softened for just a moment. Then it went hard again. "Then let us move fast before someone stops us," she said. They worked quickly. Reuben went back to the ship and brought the first 4 containers down on a cargo platform. Each container was about the size of a large toolbox, sealed and labeled with the mining company's logo. Daniil broke the seals himself. If anyone was going to take the blame, it would be him. The gray water system on Havenport recycled moisture from the air, engine, coolant runoff, and waste processing. It was technically water, but it was full of chemicals and particulates that made it unsafe to drink without treatment. The refugees had been living next to gray water outlets for weeks, but could not use them. The station had not provided purification equipment. Why would they, when clean water was selling for hundreds of credits per liter on the market levels above? Daniil dropped the first tablet into a container of gray water and watched it dissolve. Within 2 minutes, the cloudy liquid turned clear. He dipped a testing strip into it. Clean. Safe. Lyra helped them distribute. She moved through the hold, speaking to families in the Sorelli language, explaining what the tablets were and how to use them. Her voice was stronger now, steadier. She had purpose again, and it straightened her spine and cleared her eyes. Nessa drank first. 2 full cups of purified water, slowly, with Lyra holding the cup for her. The change was not instant, but within an hour, colors started returning to her skin. The faded white warmed back to a light blue. Her eyes focused. She reached out and touched Lyra's face, and tears slid down her cheeks. The first moisture her body could spare in days. Across the hold, the same scene repeated itself dozens of times. Sorelli, who had been lying motionless, sat up. Children who had been silent began to whisper and then to talk. An elderly woman near the center of the hold started singing something soft and low, a Sorelli hymn that Daniil could not understand but could feel in his chest. Farah organized the distribution with military precision. She set up stations at each gray water outlet, assigned volunteers from among the healthier refugees, and created a rotation system so everyone would get their share. Reuben rigged a simple gravity filter system using spare parts from his toolkit so the purified water could flow into larger containers for storage. By the end of the 3rd hour, every Sorelli in the hold had received clean water. But the work did not go unnoticed. Torval had eyes everywhere on the lower levels. Paid informants, security contacts, dock workers who owed him favors. Within an hour of the first tablet being dropped into gray water, he knew exactly what was happening. And he was furious. The black market water trade had been making him rich. Every day, he sold recycled water to desperate refugees at prices that would shame a war profiteer. He controlled the supply. He set the rates. And he did not tolerate competition, especially not from some human cargo hauler giving things away for free. He sent a message to the station authority. A formal complaint. Unauthorized redistribution of contracted cargo. Violation of trade protocol. Potential contamination of station water systems. He worded it carefully, using the language of law and regulation to disguise what was really just greed protecting itself. The response came faster than Daniil expected, that a station security team appeared at the entrance of the refugee hold just as Reuben was bringing down the last containers. 4 officers in gray uniforms, armed with stun weapons, led by a tall Minari with a data tablet. Daniil Sorokin, the Minari said, reading from the tablet, "You were summoned before Advisor Callan for breach of cargo contract and unauthorized distribution of trade-regulated goods. You will come with us now." The hold went silent. 300 Sorelli watched from their platforms as the human who had given them water was led away by station guards. Lyra stood at the edge of the hold, her hands clenched at her sides, and watched him go. Daniil did not resist. He walked calmly between the guards, his boots echoing on the metal floor. He did not look back, that he did not need to. He had already done what mattered. Advisor Callan's office sat at the top of Havenport Station, as far from the refugee holds as physically possible. The walls were polished metal. The floor was clean stone imported from some wealthy inner world. A window behind the desk showed the stars outside, calm and endless, as if nothing in the universe was wrong. Callan himself was a Minari, tall, thin, with smooth gray skin and 3 eyes arranged in a triangle on his long face. He wore formal robes trimmed with silver thread. His hands were folded on his desk, and his expression carried the particular kind of patience that powerful beings used when they wanted you to know that your time was worth less than theirs. Daniil stood on the other side of the desk, flanked by 2 security officers. His hands were not bound. He was not under arrest. Not yet. "You diverted contracted cargo," Callan said. His voice was smooth and unhurried. 12 containers of purification tablets belonging to the Venery Mining Collective, valued at 14,000 credits. You broke the seals, distributed the contents to unauthorized recipients, and did so without filing a single form with Station Trade Authority. "That is correct," Daniil said. "You do not deny it. There is nothing to deny. I did it." People were dying. Callan's 3 eyes blinked slowly, one after the other. It was a gesture that meant nothing in human body language, but carried weight among the Minari. Daniil had dealt with enough Minari traders to recognize it as mild irritation. People die on stations every day, Callan said. That is not a legal justification for theft. I did not steal anything. I redirected supplies to where they were needed most. The contract says otherwise. Daniil was quiet for a moment. He looked at the window behind Callan. The stars outside were beautiful. Somewhere out there, the Sorelli colony world of Ren was dry and empty, and its people were scattered across stations like this one, begging for water from species that would not give it. Advisor, Daniil said carefully, there are 300 Sorelli in Hold 9 alone. I do not know how many are in the other holds. Their species requires water at twice the rate of most beings on this station. They have been down there for weeks with no access to clean water. The gray water outlets are right next to them, but no one provided purification. Meanwhile, merchants on the levels above are selling water at 200 credits a cup. The market sets the price, Callan said. The market is killing people. That is not the station's responsibility. Havenport is a trade hub, not a relief organization. Daniil felt something tighten in his chest. Not anger, something colder. He had expected this answer. He had known, walking into this office, that Callan would not suddenly develop a conscience. The system worked exactly the way it was designed to work. Water went to those who could pay. Everyone else waited to die quietly on the lower levels where no one had to look at them. The formal complaint was filed by a merchant named Torval. Callan continued, glancing at his data tablet. He claims your actions disrupted trade operations and undermined the regulated water distribution system on the station. Torval is a black market profiteer who has been selling recycled water to dying refugees at criminal prices, Daniil said. That is an accusation you are welcome to file through proper channels. I'm telling you right now. Callan set down his tablet. His three eyes focused on Daniil with perfect clarity. Let me be direct, the advisor said. I do not care about the refugees. I do not care about Torval. I care about order. This station functions because trade contracts are honored, fees are paid, and goods move through proper channels. What you did threatens that order. If every cargo hauler decided to open sealed containers and hand out their contents based on personal feelings, the entire system would collapse. Maybe it should, Daniil said quietly. Callan stared at him for a long moment. Then he leaned back in his chair. You will be fined 8,000 credits for breach of contract. Your trading license will be reviewed, and you are prohibited from entering the refugee holds until further notice. If you violate these terms, you will be detained and your ship will be impounded. Is that understood? Daniil said nothing for several seconds. Then he nodded once. Good. You may go. The security officers walked him back to the mid-levels and left him at the entrance to the docking corridor. Daniil stood there for a moment, breathing slowly. 8,000 credits. More than he had in his accounts. More than his ship was worth on a bad day. His communicator buzzed. Farah. How bad? She asked. 8,000 fine. License review. Banned from the holds. Silence. Then Farah's voice, low and steady. Reuben already finished distributing the last containers. Every tablet has been used. Every refugee has clean water for at least another week. Daniil closed his eyes. Good, he said. The Sorelli are asking about you. Lyra especially. She keeps asking when you're coming back. He opened his eyes and looked down the corridor toward the lower levels. Somewhere down there, hundreds of people were drinking clean water for the first time in weeks because one human had stopped when everyone else walked past. I will figure something out, he said. He ended the call and walked back toward his ship. The corridor was empty. His boots made quiet sounds on the metal floor. Behind him, far below, in the refugee hold he was now forbidden from entering, Lyra sat beside her recovering mother and told her about the human who had given her water from his own canteen. Nessa listened with tears in her eyes, and when Lyra finished, she said something soft in Sorelli that meant, roughly, the universe still has good people in it. Lyra nodded, but she was already thinking about what would happen when the tablets ran out. Word traveled faster than water on Havenport Station. Within 2 days, Every refugee hold on the lower levels knew what had happened. The Sorelli told the Pelani in Hold 7. The Pelani told the Drovari in Hold 12. Dock workers carried the story up to the mid-levels. Cleaning crews whispered it in maintenance corridors. By the third day, beings who had never been below the market floor were talking about the human cargo hauler who gave away his entire shipment to save dying refugees. And it was not just the Sorelli who were suffering. Other holds had refugees from other drought-hit worlds. Pelani families who had lost their farms. Drovari laborers who had been stranded when their colonies' wells dried up. All of them crammed into converted cargo bays. All of them rationing whatever moisture they could find. All of them being slowly drained by Torval's black market prices. Now they were coming to Daniil. He could not go to the refugee holds. The ban was still in effect, so they came to him. Small groups, 1 or 2 at a time, finding their way to the docking bay where his ship sat. A Pelani mother with twin children. An elderly Drovari man who had walked for an hour on swollen legs. They stood outside his cargo ramp and asked for help, and Daniil had nothing left to give them. The tablets were gone. His canteen was refilled, but it was one canteen against hundreds of thirsty people. The 8,000 credit fine sat on his record like a weight on his chest. He could not buy water at market prices. He could not afford another shipment of tablets. He was one man with an old ship and empty pockets. But Farah had an idea. "We cannot give them water," she said, standing in the ship's small galley with her arms crossed. "But we can give them something else. Information." She had spent the last 2 days studying Havenport's public communication system. Every being on the station had access to the broadcast network. It was how trade announcements, emergency alerts, and council decisions were distributed. Anyone could submit a broadcast, though most were filtered through station authority approval. Torval's operation works because nobody sees it, Farah said. The upper levels do not know what is happening below. The council members have never been to the refugee holds. If they saw what we saw, things might change. Or they might not, Reuben said from the corner, where he was welding a pipe fitting. Callan saw it and did not care. Callan is one advisor, Farah said. The council has 32 members from different species. Not all of them are like him. Daniil listened. He was sitting on a crate, turning his empty canteen over in his hands. She was right. The darkness in the lower levels survived because no one shone a light on it. "How do we get a broadcast through without station approval?" he asked. Reuben looked up from his welding. "I can patch into the emergency channel. It bypasses the filter. Technically, it is only for life-threatening situations. People are dying of thirst," Daniil said. "That counts." They set up that night. Reuben wired a portable camera into the ship's communication array and routed it through the emergency broadcast channel. Farah wrote a short, clear statement. Daniil would not be the one speaking. That would make it look personal, like a disgruntled hauler with a grudge. Instead, they needed a face that the station could not ignore. Lyra came to them just before midnight. She had slipped out of the refugee hold through a maintenance access tunnel that the security teams did not monitor. She was small enough to fit through the narrow passages. "I want to help," she said. Daniil looked at her for a long moment. She was 10 cycles old. She had already been through more than most adults would face in a lifetime. And she was standing in his cargo bay at midnight, ready to do more. "Are you sure?" he asked. "My mother is alive because of you," she said. "Other mothers are not. I want them to see." They recorded her. Not a speech. Lyra was too young for speeches. Just her, standing in front of the camera, describing what she had seen. The hold. The thirst. The merchants who charged 200 credits for a cup of water while children lay on the floor unable to cry because they had no tears left. She spoke in simple words, in basic that most species could understand, and her voice did not shake. Then Reuben switched the feed. The broadcast went out across every screen, every speaker, every personal device on Havenport Station. Emergency channel. Unfiltered. Unstoppable. And at the same time, Torval made his move that he had been watching Daniil's ship since the hearing. He knew the human would not stay quiet. So he had assembled a team, 6 hired enforcers, Grishan and Hollian, armed with stun batons and maglocks. Their job was simple. Board the ship, seize the communication equipment, and lock down the cargo bay. They arrived 30 seconds after the broadcast began. Daniil and Ruben met them at the cargo ramp. Not with weapons. They had none. Just two humans standing in a doorway, while a 10-year-old girl spoke to the entire station behind them. The lead enforcer, a massive Hollian with 4 arms and plated skin, raised his stunned baton. "Step aside," he said. Daniil did not move. "The broadcast is already live," he said calmly. "Every being on this station is watching right now. If you touch us, they will see that too." The enforcer hesitated. He looked past Daniil at the blinking camera mounted on the cargo bay wall. He looked at his own hands, holding a weapon, framed perfectly in the shot that he lowered the baton. Behind Daniil, Lyra finished speaking. The broadcast ended, and across Havenport Station, thousands of beings sat in silence, staring at their screens, realizing for the first time what was happening in the hold beneath their feet. The council chamber had never been this full. 32 seats arranged in a wide circle, each one occupied by a species representative. Minari, Grishin, Hollian, Pelani, Drovari, and a dozen others. Behind them, in the observation gallery that ringed the upper walls, hundreds of station residents pressed together, watching. Word of the emergency session had spread within minutes of the broadcast. Beings who had never attended a council meeting in their lives had walked across the station to be here. Advisor Callan sat in the center chair, his 3 eyes scanning the crowd with visible discomfort. He had expected this session to be a quiet procedural matter, address the unauthorized broadcast, issue fines, restore order. Instead, he was facing a chamber packed with angry faces and a gallery buzzing with tension. Torval was there too, seated in the petitioner's area, wearing his expensive clothes and his confident expression. He had filed 3 formal complaints against Daniil for cargo theft, against the broadcast for violating communication protocols, and against the refugee population for unauthorized use of station water systems. He expected the council to side with him. The law was clear. Contracts were sacred on Havenport. Daniil stood on the other side of the chamber floor. He wore the same cargo hauler's jacket he always wore. His boots were scuffed. His hands were rough. Next to the polished representatives and the wealthy merchant, he looked exactly like what he was, a working man who had done something inconvenient for the wrong reasons by the station standards and the right reasons by every other measure. The session opened with Callan reading the formal complaints. Cargo diversión. Breach of trade protocol. Unauthorized emergency broadcast. Each charge carried its own penalty. Together, they could result in permanent expulsion from the station, seizure of a ship, and a record that would make it nearly impossible to find work on any major trade route. Torval spoke first. He was smooth, practiced. He framed himself as a concerned merchant protecting the integrity of Havenport's trade systems. He described Daniil's actions as dangerous vigilantism that threatened the economic stability of the station. He never once mentioned his own water prices. He never mentioned the refugees. Then Daniil spoke that he did not give a speech. He was not good at speeches. He simply described what he had seen. A girl on the market floor, too dehydrated to cry. A mother in a refugee hold, dying slowly while merchants above sold water for the price of a ship engine. Hundreds of people, packed in a cargo bays, surrounded by gray water they could not drink because no one had given them the means to purify it. "I broke a contract," he said. "That is true. I will accept whatever penalty the council decides, but I will not apologize for it. I had 12 containers of purification tablets in my cargo hold. I had 300 people dying of thirst 2 levels below me. The math was not complicated." The chamber was quiet. Then the Pelani representative stood. She was a small being with golden fur and round black eyes, and her voice carried more weight than her size suggested. "My people are in hold 7, she said. 46 families. 11 of them lost children in the last week. Not to disease, not to violence, to thirst, on a station with functioning water recycling systems." The Drovari representative spoke next. Then a Hollian council member whose brother worked the docks and had seen the refugee holds firsthand. One by one, voices rose. Not all of them were sympathetic. 2 Grishin representatives argued for upholding trade law, and a Minari delegate sided with Callan. But the tide was moving, and everyone in the chamber could feel it. The vote came at the end of the second hour, 21 to 11. Water was reclassified as a protected necessity on Havenport Station. All beings, regardless of status or ability to pay, would have access to clean drinking water. The station would install purification systems in every refugee hold within 48 hours. Torval's black market operation was officially shut down and placed under investigation. Torval left the chamber without speaking. His yellow eyes found Daniil across the room, and for a moment, something dangerous flickered in them. Then he was gone. Callan read the verdict with the same smooth, unhurried voice he always used. The fine against Daniil was reduced to 2,000 credits. His trading license was restored. The broadcast violation was dismissed on the grounds that it met the criteria for a legitimate emergency. After the session, Daniil walked down to the refugee holds. The ban had been lifted. The corridors were the same, dim, narrow, stained, but something had changed. There was sound coming from the holds. Voices. Movement. Life. Lyra met him at the entrance. She did not run to him. She walked, steady and straight, with her chin up and her eyes clear. Her skin was a healthy blue. Her hands did not shake. Behind her, Nessa was standing. She was thin and still weak, but she was on her feet. When she saw Daniil, she pressed her right hand flat against her chest and then extended it outward, palm up. The Sorelli gesture of deepest gratitude. It meant, roughly, that she was giving him a piece of something she could never take back. "You carry part of my heart now," she said in halting basic. Daniil did not know what to say to that. So he just nodded and looked at his boots for a moment until the tightness in his throat eased. Lyra tugged his sleeve. He looked down at her. "Are all humans like you?" she asked. He thought about it honestly. "No," he said. "Not all, but some." "Enough," he said. Later that week, the Venery Mining Collective received a full report of what had happened on Havenport. Their response was a single message to Daniil's ship. The cargo contract penalty was waived. A replacement shipment of purification tablets was already on its way. The message ended with a line that Daniil read 3 times before he believed it. Some deliveries matter more than the ones on the manifest. He sat in the cockpit of his old ship, staring at the stars through the viewport. Farah was running pre-flight checks beside him. Ruben was somewhere below, complaining about a hydraulic line. They had a new job waiting, basic freight, low pay, long haul. The same work they had always done. Daniil clipped his canteen to his belt. Full again. Just water. The cheapest, simplest, most ordinary thing in the universe, and the most important.